Um, on that note, I'm going to pass over to Madeleine. Madeleine's been campaigning in this area for 24 years in Sweden. She's become a very good friend of mine, and we do a lot of campaigning together, and she provides the support for me when I feel a bit low, and hopefully I do the same for you. I think you were sort of not battling, but you felt you wanted to live in a more conscious way. What I really wanted Madeleine here is because we are constantly being told we need to be more like Sweden, more like Denmark, that we need to follow a childcare pattern because their children are so happy and it's a utopian model, and so we need to be more like the Nordic countries. So I wanted Madeleine to come and just speak a little bit about what it's like in Sweden and Denmark and Norway. Over to you, Madeleine.
So, thank you for inviting me here. It's really a privilege, and as you say, we have become good friends, and it's a joy working with you. And I know a lot of faces here, and I have been working for 24 years now. So, what started this journey for me? I was expecting my 4th child, my only daughter actually. And with my first child, I was a single mother, and I moved from Stockholm to my mother because I realized that I couldn't care for my child myself. I needed the village, so I had to go back. With the second child, I stayed at home. With the first child, I had to work, but I worked part-time, and my mother helped me. So I used daycare. The second child, I used daycare. I stayed at home a little longer and worked more part-time. The third child, the same thing. But when my 4th child was inside of me, I realized that I didn't lead the path that I wanted to. I didn't do it my way, which I decided to always do from when I was 15, and very shy, terrified for speaking up in school. So here I am speaking against all odds. But I saw that the system had fooled me into doing the way they wanted me to do. I behaved in the right way, and I was a part of the community, but it didn't work. My family struggled, and we worked, both of us. We didn't have time with our children. And so I decided I will quit this. I will stay at home. And my husband, he said, no, we can't afford it. People don't do that. So he was terrified. And I decided that this is my wish and we have to do this. Otherwise, we will maybe have a divorce. The family will break. And afterwards, of course, it was the best thing I could have done, or we could have done. So I became this motherhood activist, angry and upset seeing that society doesn't support this way of living, that motherhood doesn't mean anything, despite that I felt that this is the most important thing I can do at this moment. So from that time, 24 years ago, I have been campaigning and working in 2 different organizations, a Swedish national organization and also FEFAF, European Federation, speaking at several places and trying to talk to politicians, especially in Sweden. And it's very difficult, I would say. You meet a lot of resistance and a lot of... It's painful for many people. Sometimes when you talk about motherhood, they are like taking a step back because it hurts them. And we don't talk about it, so it's It's like a disease in the whole society. So, the next slide, please. I will talk a bit about the situation in Sweden today, about parental leave in Sweden, Denmark, and Finland, and the situation for mothers and children today, the outcomes and future care. What can we do about it? Okay, I'm too slow. I know. Yeah, but I am. I am. I'm sorry. So the next slide, please. The situation in Sweden today. We have a generous parental leave. It's amazing if you do the right way. Do it the right way, because you have to work before. If you don't plan your life, it might be difficult. And I had like 6 pounds a day, because I didn't make the right choice. So my husband took all the days. And at that time, you could transfer all the days in between you. The childcare is really accessible. Every child has the right to be in preschool, and it's very cheap. Gender equality is very important in Sweden, and the Swedish government for equality is about women and men having the same power to shape society and their own lives. But I don't feel that they give us the right to choose freely, because there is no choice to stay at home. There is a choice, but you're not supported. So, and the stress and the mental illness among children and youth are rising. School results are going down. Women are on sick leave much more than men. I think it's double. They are on sick leave because of stress in a much higher, yes, proportion than men. So it's both bad and good. The efforts and the intention is very good, I think, because they want to support parents in caring for the children in the right way. And then they are convinced that the research says that children do better off in preschools. So intentions are good, but the outcome maybe not. So the next slide, please. This is the parental leave in Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. You can't see Finland, but it's quite similar in these countries. We have 480 days in Sweden, 16 months, but many of them are, or after 13 months, it's very low paid. Only 13 pounds a day. So in Denmark, 12 months, and Finland, about 10.5 months. So the next slide, please. And there's a lot of children who attend preschool in Sweden. But actually, yesterday, I found out that in Sweden, in 2023, it was 87%. So it has gone down from the first number, 95, that was in 2021. So something has happened. More stay-at-home parents. Denmark is the best in the class in having children in preschool, and Finland actually, they are a bit worried because many parents keep their children at home for a longer time, especially for it's changing as well. Oh. So the next slide. In Sweden, again. So you can go to preschool from the age of 1, and 50% of children who are 1 year old are in preschool. And it's not childcare, it's under the education system. So it's called preschool now. And children from 1, they are considered students. Yeah. And that's different from Denmark and Finland. So, and from age 3, all children are entitled to 15 hours free. You don't pay for that per week. But in Stockholm, I think it's 30. You can have 30 hours freely. So it's a bit different from different municipalities. There is a maximum fee, and parents pay around 8% of the real cost, and that's about £120 per month. Stay-at-home parents, there's no support. And actually, the municipalities are required to carry out outreach activities to make parents aware of the importance of preschool and why they should leave their children there. And sometimes they also give a place even if you haven't asked for it. So, and also the fertility rate has gone down in Sweden. We have now 1.45 children per woman, and it's the lowest since Sweden started counting in 1749. It's 1.44 in England, and as you said, it was 2.1 is the replacement rate. But Sweden we're not worried about that, not yet. It will come, I think. Next slide, please. And will you tell me the time? Yeah, okay. So the next slide, please. We have something called the preschool riot. It's a huge, not an organization, but they started out 13 years ago. Some preschool teachers who they didn't think they were listened to, and the situation in preschools are getting worse and worse with big groups and a few people who work there, and also a lot of people who don't stay in the jobs. They quit. Difficult to get replacement workers. So they have 36,000 followers on their Facebook groups, and I read stories every day about the situation, and it's not good. It's not good for the people who work there, so you can imagine for children. It's really very sad. But they work mainly for the teachers, the pedagogues, not for the children. I wish they would. So, the next slide, please. Finland. I think Finland is the best in the Nordic countries, actually. But you can start in this early. Oh, what is it now? Early care and education for children, I think. When you're 9 months old. But they have, one moment. I don't know where I am. Sorry. Yeah, they have this child home care allowance since somewhere in the beginning of the 80s, 83 maybe. That allows parents to stay at home for 3 years, and it's like €378 a month for a child under the age of 3, and a bit extra for every child if you have more children under the age of 3. They have daycare centers and group family centers, so it's not under the education system in the same way. It's more care than in Sweden. And I would say that they are more focused on families still than in Sweden. And they have something special, that's the maternity grant and baby box. It's they get a box for essential baby items for the first when you get the first baby. and it's free, and it's very high quality things that it should be enough for the first year. Or you can choose to receive 170 euros instead. So that's a good thing. Okay, hurry up. Okay, the next slide. And that's Denmark. And they can start at 6 months. And then that's for the first 3 years, it's more care and play. And then after 3 years of age, it's more like education or preparing for school. And then it's called kindergarten or børnehave. I don't speak Danish. And also Danish municipalities offer some subsidies for both daycare and all of them offer that for daycare and kindergarten, but some also give support to parents who stay at home. And it differs between municipalities. Some don't give anything at all, while some give like 100 euro, a bit more, up to around 700. I'm guessing a bit here, but it's around that. So, slide number 9, please, or the next one. So, I did a trip to Nigeria some years ago, and what I brought with me and what was striking was the maternal instincts, and I felt that they had something that we don't have any longer. It was like a natural bond between women and their children. It was like a natural dance. They were so close, and it was actually so painful to feel that, and to come back and see that we don't have that any longer. And I know that we had it when I grew up, and now you see it sometimes, but not often. I have a sister who is a midwife, and she says it's when you see the connection coming by instincts, it's more rare now than it has ever been. It's really very sad. So we can lose the instincts, I am sure, and it can go quickly. We need to be there, and if we lose that, I don't know what kind of humanity we are heading for. So, on the last one, I think. And I don't have time. I have some time. Okay. I don't like speaking to these numbers and statistics and figures. It's not me. I wish I could have spoken from the heart all the time, because that's who I am. And I think we need to get back to a way where we do ways from the heart, not from the computer or AI. We need to feel, and we need to share our stories, our experiences, and support one another. And I think we need to ask from our politicians to be more, to listen more, not striving for constant growth, because there won't be any growth if people don't grow first. So, also I would encourage you to all act. Everyone can do something. You can sit in your kitchen and you can write to a politician. You can do so many things, and all these small letters or talking to someone, it means so much. And if many people do it more often, I think we would reach a change more quickly. So we have this article 25.2 from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. We have lost that somehow. it's there for a reason. And it's not that we are weak as women, mothers, but we are vulnerable in the situation. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeleine. We will make time for questions, but just in a little while, because we've got scheduled to zoom in with James Heckman and Alison, who's his co-director. So I think we'll just quickly show the video and then zoom in as fast as we can.
My name is James Heckman. I'm the director of the Center for the Economics of Human Development. And with me is...
Hi, I'm the executive director, Alison Balas.
Together, we've been building a research center over the last few years, decade or so, where we're trying to investigate the determinants of successful lives, starting from the earliest years. And one of the major ingredients that we've located and determined in studies done in Jamaica, in the United States, in Ireland, and in China, just to offer some examples, are programs that actually promote parenting and promote this intense engagement between the mother and the child. Usually the parent, the child we say, but it's usually the mother who's playing the major role in parenting.
And so through this body of work, whether we're evaluating a program that is happens in a center or happens in the home, we see the active engagement of the parent, which usually is the mother or the full family, the grandmother, grandparents, aunts and uncles. When they're involved in the development of the child, you get a high return, which pays off throughout the life cycle. When you're investing early, that continues to compound. And so from an economic standpoint, an efficiency of investment would be to work with the parent rather than exclusively focusing as a policy into center-based programs. Families can choose, and there's a lot of different ways to promote child development.
I want to add that much of the literature that worries about promoting child development focuses exclusively, or nearly exclusively, I should say, on programs from the government or from NGOs or some private foundations somehow. Organizations like the Perry Preschool Group, which was a quasi-governmental organization in Michigan when it started. But we also notice, and this is really important, that the studies that are lacking in this area and that really need to be done more systematically is understanding the value of a mother. I mean, it sounds obvious, but we've studied much more the value of sending kids to a program or visiting them with this, that, or the other thing. And rarely have we studied the literal value of the mother interacting with the child, promoting the child. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence and some empirical evidence, but relative to the body of literature on interventions, the study of the family is very much understudied relative to these other topics. So I think it's a very important frontier in this area.
And so we have evaluated a number of home visiting programs where you're sending in a professional to work with a parent in the home. And again, this is often the mother is the target, but there will be other families there. And we see across the life cycle, one of the programs we've studied, Reach Up and Learn, the Jamaica program, we call it, has been evaluated with our group at age 23 and age 31, and you do see economic outcomes. So again, these investments that happen just in the home with a community member visiting or a trained professional visiting really do have effects that, as Professor Heckman was saying, typically these programs or government funding will look to cognitive outcomes and test scores once children get to school or within a center, but you can still achieve those outcomes when you're working just with parents and families in the home.
And I'd add to that list social and emotional outcomes and health, which are important dimensions of these types of studies. But I will go back and try to reiterate the point that literally we need to understand much better the workings of the family. And we need to separate out the notion that somehow early childhood is an area that should be a form of schooling. We think of schooling as bricks and mortar, sending kids off, classrooms and lectures. But literally parenting, engaging the child, social and emotional engagement, staying with the child through this progress, those features are really not studied to the same extent, and they're crucial to understanding what's going on and why any of these programs work. And one of the exciting dimensions of our work here is our exploration of the role of the family, understanding that most studies focus on one child, but rarely, in many of the less developed countries, there's only one child in a family. So understanding the spillover across the siblings in a family, and even understanding the spillover across families in small communities, these are things that need much more investigation and which we're engaged in doing.
And that's one of the exciting projects that we're doing here at our center is a project called Creciendo Juntos, which is bringing a program from Ireland, the Preparing for Life program. It's still in operation. It's scaling up all over. We're really excited about it. Adapting that here in Chicago with Latino families in the Back of the Yards neighborhood. We're working with a community organization, Casa Central, because we believe that it's very important that the families who are served by a community organization, that they feel understood, they feel someone with a shared lived experience, language, culture, that they can really cheerlead the parent who is the child's first teacher. And as Professor Heckman saying, it's a full family. It's not just one child, right? You're going to build parenting more generally.
And so I do express my regret that I'm not able to speak to you in person. I had planned to be in London, but it's not possible. As it turned out, I had some problem with my leg and I need to lay off travel for a while. So I hope in the future to see you in person, and I wish your conference all the best.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Just to have James Heckman there, and I think you're online, James. Are you? It's just amazing. Thank you so much for doing the video for us, and actually thank you for speaking about this, the importance of the family, and looking at how important it is economically as well as the value. The sort of social, the emotional, spiritual value as well. I think you're online, available hopefully to take some questions.
Thank you very much, and it's been very good to listen to you. I wondered whether you had encountered the effective provision of preschool education research, which was done in the UK and from about 2004 to about 2015. And did study the early home learning environment, which definitely connects with what you're talking about, which parents do within the home.
Well, I've heard about it. I don't know many of the details, and so you'd have to remind me, and remind me quite a bit. So I don't want to comment on the specifics of the program, but I do remember listening to some discussions about it. So.
I just would say that I think it exactly mirrors the areas that you're talking about, and I am glad to hear that it has crossed the Atlantic. It does show that the results continued from under the age of 3, certainly into the age of 14, in terms of language development and social and emotional development. And I'm not sure whether it continued after that. Thank you so much for your talk.
Well, we do have a lot of evaluations, I should say, studies of interventions that work with parents, studies that show the value of the active, productive home life. And that's completely consistent with what you're describing, lifetime consequences, actually. Allison and I recently wrote a paper that was put out in the NBER, and it's part of a study that was done looking at the Perry preschool program, which was launched some 60 years ago now, I guess. And we followed these participants, and we've also followed their children. So these children, program was conducted in the early 1960s, and it was conducted through, and it still continues, that we collect the data. So the participants are close to 60 years old now, but we also have data on their children. And it's effective in a purely treatment dose response type of framework. But when you look at the mechanisms of what's going on in the program and what makes it effective, and this is something that gets lost frequently, people just report treatment effects and say, there, the program works. The chemistry of the program is really galvanizing the parents to act and just changing the emotional and home life of the child and providing that child with an ongoing parents, families that are actually then going to stimulate the child and keep the child active and engaged. And it changes the lives of children. And we see this in many different environments. We've been engaged, for example, a lot of work that's been done by people in the early childhood community have looked at a variety of different treatment effects programs. But we've recently been engaged, as Allison was saying in the video, on home visiting programs in particular. And there are programs that I've been engaged with in Ireland, Preparing for Life, Orla Doyle's work, but also work in China, and work now, as Allison described, in the western part, or part of Chicago, called Back of the Yards, a traditional neighborhood. And the goal is, and it's based on a series of studies, that the most effective component of all of these early childhood programs is engaging the parents, and usually the mother. In China, sometimes the parent or the caregiver is a grandmother, and it's necessary that she be there because the parents are off working in the West, and therefore not really able to be with the child. And we've done a great deal of studies, though. And one of the interesting studies relevant to your group, we looked at a study in China, another study in China, and we looked at the effect of what happens when the mother's away from the family. And the mother and the father can send money back, so they get remittances. The grandmother raises the child. We're not quarreling with the intention of the grandmother. On the other hand, what you find is the remittances, such as they are, nowhere near compensate for the impact of the lost mothering and fathering that goes on as a result of children having their children being left behind, I should say, in rural China. So there's very strong evidence on parenting, and I think that's I'm very glad to support your work, and I do think that parenting is enormously important. So, I mean, it's just putting it in those terms is kind of obvious, of course, but at the same time, it's neglected in public policy.
Should we go to an online question?
Yeah, we've got one online for you. Oh, wait. I'm good. Oh, good. Sorry, James. We've got a question online for you. It says, here in the UK, parents are being heavily incentivised to place their children in full-time childcare from the age of 9 months. What are your views on universal childcare and the idea that childcare is good for all children from all backgrounds?
Well, I just think it's a bad idea. I think that, first of all, the notion that, look, it depends on the quality of the childcare, obviously, but the point is that just the idea of taking the parent out of the life of the child, which is what the child care centers frequently do, and at least not engaging the mother actively in the child care center. It could be that the mother has to work. It could be that the mother has obligations. But no matter what, the crucial thing is to engage her in the activities supporting her interaction with the child. And I think that's something that gets easily overlooked in the discussions that about universal child care. I mean, look, it's a study that was done several years ago looking at a study in Quebec. And many people have noticed that child care centers were set up in Quebec. And when randomized trials were conducted, it turned out that the program tended to have negative consequences, especially behavioral consequences, and especially for boys. And what was found was something very interesting, I think. First of all, the negative consequences were found when the environments that the children were placed in did not match the quality of the environments at home, namely the education of the mother, the engagement of the mother, and the like. Now, for severely disadvantaged children, where the environment was extremely poor, then this kind of average environment that's provided by a government program did benefit them. They were given some stimulation that they were not getting at home and in their neighborhoods. But many children, especially boys, were very negatively affected by removing the child from the family, not removing, but I mean taking it away 6-7 hours a day, and removing the influence of the parent on the life of the child. And that was the most so for the more educated women and the ones who actually tend to benefit their children the most. And by that I mean mothers benefit their children across all education spectra. But it's the educated mothers, the ones speaking actively, giving good verbal baths to the children, who really provide the stimulation that helps child development. And so removing that through the government program, it saved the mothers money, but it had no way that it provided the same kind of home environment. So if you want to take children and put them in pre-K or centers of nursery schools, that's fine, but you should at least adjust the quality. And many people would say, okay, we make it universal quality and high quality, but I'm afraid that's just not the way most government programs work, just because of budgetary matters. This is very priceless. If you were to value, and this is not done very much, if you were to value what an educated mother who spends a lot of time with the child, who takes the child in development, encourages the child, gives the child all kinds of options and lessons about life, and just gives the child somebody to imitate and somebody to learn from on an hourly, even an hourly basis for sure, and basically minute by minute, that is not easily replaced by a child care center. And so we need to value much more than we do the contributions of these mothers. They get ignored in the GDP and they get ignored in a lot of social policy. I think that's a big mistake, and it's been noted for quite a while that this home production question is really badly treated by most economic and social analyses.
Thank you. Am I being heard, Jeff, if I carry on? Great. I think the next question we've got leads on from that nicely. Keith has asked, why is parenting neglected in public policy?
Well, I don't know the good answer for an English audience, but I will tell you why it is in the U.S. First of all, we have many dysfunctional families. There's no question about it. Unlike the United States, I don't think England has the same problem of out-of-wedlock births and disadvantaged single-parent mothers. Single parenting is a major problem in terms of creating poverty. I mean, if you look at the U.S. poverty statistics, which many people have commented on, you'll find that it's the single-family parent homes where the mother is the single sole breadwinner and responsible for raising the child, and for a whole range of issues the mother must conduct her life. This is a source of great stress on the mother, but it's also a stress on the child too. And so I think that people don't want to admit it, especially because in the United States it has a racial dimension. That in the United States, in Chicago, for example, 70 to 80% of all African American children are born out of wedlock, and a lot of the single parenting is found in that environment. Not all of it by any means, but it creates an issue that many politicians and people interested more in winning votes than in trying to help people will try to make into an issue. So we had just a recent discussion here in Chicago last Friday, I should say. We had a whole discussion about the problem of agency, about teaching children how to take charge of their own lives and how to gain responsibility. But one of the overtones of this discussion was that many politicians and political figures gain tremendously by trying to tell children that they can't succeed and that they need the government, or they need this particular component in their lives. Whereas thinking, really honestly reflecting on the fact that parenting is severely challenged in many ways, is difficult and will frequently lead to discussions that are more of a political nature than a real substantive nature about understanding the family and what's good for the child. So I think it's neglected because people don't want to, it's a sensitive subject. There's another reason, and that is that people would also argue, and I think this is really where I think parental involvement is so crucial. Many people would argue, well, if we turn our children at very young ages over to some center or to some bureaucrats or to a group of people, then what we're doing is we're abdicating our responsibilities as parents. And I think that's a huge issue. And people really do not want that kind of discussion. They do not want that, thinking that, no, they might be sort of created by the state and in some ways being influenced by the state, a totalitarian vision. And I think that's a possibility in the sense that unless parents are actively involved, that their way to influence, passing on their values, passing on their beliefs, which is part of parenting, and engaging with the child in the impersonality of the centers and so forth, that's a big problem. But people don't want to admit that many families are fractured and need support. And need support in one powerful way is to simply give suggestions about how to parent. And that's been proven to be effective in the studies we've looked at in home visiting.
I would also add that so teachers and practitioners definitely know that, so those in centers definitely know that parents are important, but when there's not enough investments, I think teachers are under strain. They don't have enough time to do home visits or engage with the parents, or sometimes there's policies or oftentimes there's policies where parents are not allowed into classrooms or into the centers. So I would say those are some channels by which policy kind of leaves out parents, even though those on the front lines understand the value, as well as the early Head Start program here in the US. So there are investments in home visiting programs, but the evidence isn't as strong as it is in other programs. And so for that, I think there are incremental investments in home visiting, which again is either community members, paraprofessionals, professionals working with parents directly, providing services in the home. But there are other policy constraints there would include, I think I've heard that there are some unions for home visitors in some states, and then that constrains their hours. So they can't serve families after 5 p.m. So how do you reach a working parent? So there's not that flexibility built into, or reality built into policy. And then, so I see somebody brought up speech and language therapists. There is a pilot program here in Chicago, as well as other areas, I'm sure, where you're trying to reach those families who are at home. I think the majority of kids are at home rather in centers in the earliest ages. And so when you do want to intervene early with speech issues, which if a child's at a center, a teacher is going to have a lot more experience understanding that a child's not meeting their developmental milestones. Parents may not, or parents may be worried about doing that. It's a very natural thing to be concerned if your child isn't meeting milestones. You want to give them more time. So how do you reach that parent? And so they're trying to find different ways. But of course, again, the scheduling is difficult, and just the logistics of getting into a lot of homes. So that's definitely an area I think that can be improved.
Thank you so much, both of you, for coming. We're really pressed for time, but I just have one last question, and that is the work that we do as mothers is seen as economically inactive, and is there a way of accounting for it so that we're not paid to do it, because we don't really want to be paid for something we do for love, but is there a way of accounting for it so that it's not seen as economic inactivity?
I mean, that's such a short-sighted vision that it's economic activity, but there's a way to do it. And one way to do it is to simply, one way I've tried to do in the past, and we were together in Budapest a year ago. I was trying to do this in a somewhat indirect way, but looking at what we do know, a lot of work has gone into evaluating programs. Very little work has gone into really studying families. But when you look at the value of early childhood program, an intense interaction program that benefits the life of the child, you get huge benefits. You get hundreds of thousands of US dollars per year in some cases, but a rate of return that's about 13, 14%, very large. But the fact is that non-market activity typically does not receive the attention it should. Every once in a while, there's a commission. I know that a few years ago, there was a plan by the president of France and a few economists to value the non-market, so-called non-market economy. But mothering is a crucial part of the non-market economy, and we can measure it. We can measure the value of a woman's time. We can look at the increment that comes in the life of the child. And increasingly, with models of the household that I've been working on and others have been working on, it's possible to come up with a much more comprehensive vision of exactly what home production is worth. And so there are studies. I would actually urge you to take a look at those studies, because I think the idea of inactivity is completely crazy. I mean, I understand there's a technocratic vision. Years and years ago, when I first came to the University of Chicago, somebody asked me, an economist, a very distinguished economist, Harry Johnson, who was Canadian and spent a lot of time at LSE, but also at Chicago, gave me a book to read by a sociologist. And the sociologist was talking about the productivity of women and so forth. And the only way she measured productivity of women was by a salary in the market. And by the way, it's still true today. If you look at Claudia Golden, and if you look at people like who won the Nobel Prize for her work on the economics of women, and Mary Ann Bertrand, and many of these people, the ardent feminists who are looking at these questions, they only value the woman by the money she makes in the market. They don't even look at the studies of home production. And that's a totally under-researched area. I mean, there's research on it, but it's totally under-researched. And it's amazing, because back in the day, Simon Kuznets was an American, he's an immigrant American who came and worked on developing national accounts. This was in the 1930s. And even then, and every competent national accounts administrator has said so since Kuznets, that the neglect of family and the neglect of housework and the neglect of the value in training the children and raising a family was a huge omission from the national budgets. And it still persists to this day. It's viewed as soft and fuzzy. Fortunately, we're making progress in this area, but it should receive a lot more attention. And I think it's much easier for bureaucrats to evaluate a government program than to really say, okay, let us look at the benefits that what a mother provides to the child. We know what those benefits are. If we paste together these different aspects of what children do, what parents do, and how children benefit, and how the whole family benefits. It's not just the children, it's the spouse and the other parts of the family. But that work is completely neglected in a lot of the national accounts, and it needs to be rectified. People have made efforts to do so, but they've been sporadic, and they're not recognized politically by many of the leading politicians on both sides, on all sides. It's not a question of left and right. The view of the market valuation of the woman. So if we see, for example, that there's statements made about the progress of women, and it's always charted with how many women are on government boards, or how many women are on the boards of corporations or vice presidents and so forth. But it's all a market test. And the value of the non-market is really neglected. And we are working on that. And it's a very important part of what we do, and a very important part of parts of economics.
I just want to say thank you so much, James. Thank you, Alison, for joining us. I mean, that was just amazing. And we really hope to work with you in the future. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.